In this video, we will look at the imaginary, symbolic, and the real, the three orders or registers proposed by Jacques Lacan. As usual, we will begin with Lacan and then we will move on to his theory. So, Jacques Lacan is from Paris. You know, Paris is in France. He is a French psychoanalyst of the 20th century. Now, he was a very good looking, intellectual person of his times. He was thought to be a celebrity. But along with that, he was also very controversial. He was a psychiatrist who had very unusual ways of treating his patients. At times, he would spend only some minutes with them, and sometimes he would spend hours. He won't call them patients because they would feel that they are sick. And he even brought his barber into the clinic while treatment. He would get his hair done, and he thought that all these things would make his patients feel more comfortable with him. So, Lacan is a very important and also controversial psychoanalyst of the 20th century. Also, remember that Lacan was known as the French Freud because he renewed the interest in Freud and his theories. I have provided two quotations of Lacan which are very popular and important too. The first one is, I am where I think not. It refers to the unconscious mind. The second quotation is that the unconscious is structured like language. Just as how Saussure said language is structured, Lacan is of the opinion that the unconscious is also structured like language. So, as I just told you, Lacan was very controversial, and because of all that, Lacan's name was removed from practicing psychologist groups. That's when Lacan decided to start his own psychoanalytic institution named the Freudian School of Paris. It is clear that he was a great admirer of Freud. Lacan always claimed to be a Freudian. He told his followers to look at his works as a return to Freud. But many scholars and critics doesn't believe this to be true. They think of Lacan to be an original thinker because along with the similarities that Lacan and Freud have, there are also many differences between them. To give a simple example, we will look at their writing style. Freud is very simple and clear in his writing, whereas Lacan has this complex writing style. He would include equations and diagrams to all the theories that he make. Thus, even though Lacan claims to be a Freudian, we think of him as an original thinker. He is called the French Freud because he revived the works of Sigmund Freud. So anyway, he founded the school of psychoanalysis, but before he died, he dissolved the school and he told his followers, it's up to you to be Lacanians if you wish, but I am a Freudian. Also, after his death, his followers renamed the institution as the Lacanian School of Psychoanalysis. Rather than writing books, Lacan conveyed his theories through seminars. Apart from his thesis, the only book that he has published during his lifetime is The Equits, a Selection. And this contained all the major essays that Lacan had written till then. Now, the mirror stage that we will soon discuss, the idea of the mirror stage was given by Lacan for the first time in a seminar in a conference of International Psychoanalytic Association in 1936. Now, this was a conference when Lacan was stopped midway by the chairperson of the conference because he did not agree with the theory put forward by Lacan. Anyway, Lacan added his theory with some modifications in his book later, and we are going to discuss about this theory of Lacan. So yes, that's about him. Now, there are two things that you should keep in your mind. Firstly, Lacan was very much influenced by the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, and secondly, the first register among the three, that is the imaginary, symbolic and the real, the first among these to be presented by Lacan was that of the mirror stage or the imaginary. Let's look at the major idea put forward by Lacan. According to Lacan, our psychological development contains three orders or three registers. They are the imaginary order, which is also called the mirror stage, the symbolic order, and the real. These three orders together form a complex like the Borromean rings. You can see from the picture that the three circles are linked and they cannot be separated from each other. But if one of these circles breaks, then the other two can be separated easily. The same way, Lacan's three orders are also mutually dependent. Now there are a lot of confusions regarding which stage comes first, the imaginary or the real. In a person's life, the actual order of these stages is the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. The real comes first. But when Lacan presented this idea, the first order that he came up with is the imaginary order, then the symbolic, and later the real. So I am following the same order in which Lacan has presented the ideas, so it will be easier to understand. So first let's see what the imaginary order or the mirror stage is. This stage occurs during the infancy period from 6 to 18 months. Before this period, the baby did not have a sense of self. The baby thought that he was the same person as his mother or his caretaker. But now the infant starts to see his image in the mirror and understands that he is a separate person. He recognizes his image in the mirror. And soon he becomes very fascinated with the image that he sees. He tries to control it and he tries to play with it. This period is called the period of narcissism or self-love because the child becomes obsessed with his own image even though it is only an illusion, it is only a reflection on the mirror. Now, along with all these, the child also realizes that there is something that he lost. He understands that he is separate from the mother, so a feeling of loss also gets into him. So, in the imaginary order or the mirror stage, the child recognizes its image on the mirror, and this image is known as the small other. Because this image is external to us, it is just something on which we project our self. So Lacan calls it the other. A very important characteristic of this stage is the formation of ego. The ego starts to develop during the mirror stage. Also, this is a stage when we enter into language. We don't have much vocabulary, but still we learn language and language starts to develop. With time, we gain mastery over language and we move into the symbolic order. So here the child has entered into language. See, the imaginary was all about identification. The child tries to identify itself in the mirror. Here in the symbolic order, it is all about language. Through language, socialization happens in us. We start to accept the rules, norms, taboos, etc. of the society in which we live. Everything is symbolic at this stage. Lacan calls language the big other. We already saw other means something which is external to us. Earlier, the image was the small other. Here, the language is called the big other. The otherness in both comes from the fact that they are both external to us. The image and language is external to us. But language is called the big other because language is something that has existed even before our existence. And even after death, it will not cease to exist. So earlier the child would look at the mirror, see his image there and say, yes, that's me. Now, in the symbolic order, the individual starts to find his identity, define his identity with language rather than image. I acts as self. We project ourself on it even though it is something external to us. Now, in the mirror stage, the child slowly learns language. He starts learning language, and in the symbolic order, he becomes a master at it. Lacan is of the opinion that everything or every stage of our life is influenced by this language. But after presenting these two orders, Lacan admits that there is a period when this is not the case. That is how he put forward his idea of the real. This is the order that comes first in our life when we are only 0 to 6 months old in the neonatal stage. This is the only period in our life when we do not use language. This is a period when the baby is very much dependent on his mother for his needs. The baby doesn't know that he is a separate individual. He has this feeling of oneness with the mother or the caretaker. So there is no sense of self. The baby thinks that he is the same person as his mother. So in this order there is an absoluteness, or as Lacan calls it, it is very real. It is a state of completeness. And the child loses this state of completeness as soon as he grows and enters into language. So this is the only period in an individual's life when the individual would feel this complete and is not affected or structured by language. That's it. I hope you have understood. The real stage comes first. It is a stage of completeness when we have not entered language. We see ourselves as one with the mother and we do not have a sense of self. After this comes the imaginary stage or the mirror stage. During this phase, the child starts to recognize its image on the mirror. The child understands that he is a different individual. The ego develops during this time. Also, the child enters into language. And then comes the symbolic order during which the child has totally entered into language. The child undergoes the process of socialization. He accepts the rules and norms of the society. Instead of recognizing himself based on an image, the individual starts to understand his identity using language. So these are the three orders, or as Lacan calls it, the three registers of our psychological development. That's all for this video. I hope you have understood this. If this video was useful to you, please do subscribe and share it with your friends. And thank you so much for watching.